Dogan responded with a melancholy smile. That's fine. What if I became your concubine? Emma coughed hard at the unexpected suggestion. Emma Sullivan's eyes watered. Emma Sullivan didn't mind, but Elijah Collins surely would. As if summoned by Emma Sullivan's thoughts, the door slammed open. Elijah Collins strode in with his sword drawn and pointed at Dogan Miller. What did you just say? Elijah Collins demanded coldly. Dogan Miller's bravado evaporated. Dogan Miller looked ready to faint. Elijah Collins, it seemed, had merely been in the area investigating the Sea City corruption case. Finding Emma Sullivan here had clearly not been part of his plans. One of Elijah Collins's guards scowled at Emma Sullivan. Lady Emma Sullivan, how could you dine with another man? Embarrassed, Emma Sullivan stammered. It's not what it looks like. Elijah Collins cut in with a firm voice. The fault lies not with her. Elijah Collins pondered for a moment and then asked, when you were young, did you truly want to marry the richest man in the city? Of course, who wouldn't dream of marrying the richest man? But Emma shook her head and replied, I didn't. Elijah's gaze softened, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his lips. There's no need to comfort me. This is my failing. I should work harder. Emma Sullivan thought to herself that perhaps Elijah Collins's recent interactions with General Sullivan had rubbed off on him. The stubborn streak must be contagious in a quiet alleyway. Emma hooked her finger around his tonight and declared, I'll join you for dinner. The Crown Prince's evening meals were simple, consisting of 1 dish of rye bread and 1 bowl of oatmeal porridge. The cook explained that His Highness loves oatmeal, which Emma mused might be because he hadn't tasted anything else. After Elijah left, Emma instructed the head chef to prepare spiced stew and honey-glazed ham. That night, the chef hesitated, explaining that he had only ever made rye bread and oatmeal porridge. Emma Sullivan asked June to stay and assist. When the dishes were finally served, Elijah Collins took a bite and frowned slightly before he could comment. Suddenly, the kitchen maid sprang forward, shouting, Villain, prepare to meet your end! The dishes are poisoned with a colorless, tasteless toxin that activates upon contact with water. You won't live to see tomorrow. She was immediately seized, her demeanor wild and unhinged. The maid had served in Crown Prince Elijah Collins' household for 8 years. Once abandoned by her son, the maid had attempted to drown herself in the river while searching for him in the capital. Elijah Collins had saved her during that desperate moment. She was supposed to be trustworthy. Why? Elijah Collins asked, his voice calm yet edged with steel. Tears streamed down the maid's face as she spoke. The man you executed yesterday was my only son. He may have embezzled some disaster relief funds, but he didn't deserve to die. I didn't even get to see him. One last time, the guards pressed Olivia Harper to the ground. Hand over the antidote. Olivia cried bitterly. There is no antidote. In half an hour, the poison will take effect. He'll suffer greatly, unable to live or die. No antidote. Emma Sullivan threw herself onto Elijah Collins, sobbing hysterically. Your Highness, you mustn't die between whales, Emma muttered. Emma swapped the cabbage stew for spiced stew and honey-glazed ham. The pork and water were top grades sent from the Silver Stag Inn, and the dishes were prepared by June herself. Where could the poison have come from? The maid's wild expression froze. Emma Sullivan did not eat the oatmeal, the maid asked weakly. Silence fell over the room, confirming that the poison was in the oatmeal. The maid closed her eyes. It's fate. Why did it have to be today? The maid exhaled, one last breath, and slumped over. A guard stepped forward to report. Your Highness? The maid poisoned herself beforehand. Elijah Collins let out a slow breath and instructed. Take her away. Then he glanced down at Emma and said softly, You're hurting me. The royal physician arrived promptly, and after taking Elijah Collins' pulse, declared Elijah Collins unharmed. Elijah Collins smoothed away the tears at the corner of Emma Sullivan's eyes. Elijah Collins said, Don't worry. From now on, I'll taste everything before you eat. Emma Sullivan felt deeply moved, though the thought unsettled Emma Sullivan. If General Sullivan heard about this, General Sullivan would scold Emma Sullivan for failing to care for the Crown Prince. So Emma Sullivan protested. No, I should taste everything first. I'll go first, Elijah Collins insisted. How can you argue about this? Elijah Collins insisted on tasting the food first. Emma Sullivan countered, asserting that she would. The two were on the verge of a playful bicker when Elijah's loyal guard interjected, suggesting that it might be best if he tasted the food first. With the corruption case resolved, the day of the grand wedding arrived. Elijah Collins petitioned the emperor to distribute grain to the poor in honor of Emma Sullivan as a virtuous crown princess. Thus, on the wedding day, the streets were filled with cheering crowds. Some held flowers, while others wore joyous smiles. The bridal procession swept grandly into the crown prince's residence. Once inside the bridal chamber, Emma Sullivan flopped onto the bed. It's so hot, Emma said. Elijah Collins's gaze darkened slightly, a predatory glint appearing in his eyes. What's wrong? Emma asked, clad in her wedding robes. Elijah stood tall and regal, his features impossibly handsome. Lowering his gaze, Elijah murmured, Nothing. I just remembered the books you once gave me. Books on our wedding night. Who talks about books? But under the dim candlelight, Elijah's chiseled features seemed even more alluring, and Emma suddenly felt a shy flutter. Oh, well then, Emma Sullivan stammered. Why don't Elijah Collins and Emma read for a bit? Elijah pulled the books from under his pillow, and Emma couldn't help but laugh. Let me see what treasures Elijah has hidden. To think, the Crown Prince keeps books under his pillow, flipping through the pages. Emma's amusement quickly vanished before she could react. Elijah tugged at the ribbon of Emma's robe and said, Crown Princess, his voice low and rich, allow me to reciprocate your declaration of love. My declaration. What had Emma said on the wall? Their shadows entwined, separated, then came together again. In the height of passion, Elijah whispered, I adore you, Crown Princess. Breathless and trembling, Emma replied, I like you too, Crown Prince. Meanwhile, in the front hall, Emperor James and General Sullivan were drinking tea. Emperor James had intended to wait for Elijah, but quickly deduced the situation. After all, he had once been a young groom himself. Muttering under his breath, That rascal General Sullivan! In a rare moment of good spirit, General Sullivan gazed at his daughter's bridal finery and was reminded of his late wife. 18 years passed, and Emperor Richard murmured in contemplation. The Emperor fell silent before speaking gravely. General Edmund Sullivan, it is I who wronged you. General Sullivan shook his head, taking a sip of wine. Your Majesty need not say such things. Even if I were to do it all again, I would make the same choice 18 years ago, when rebels stormed the imperial capital. One group breached the palace, while another attacked the Sullivan estate. General Sullivan's wife was heavily pregnant. At that time, upon hearing the news, General Sullivan ordered most of his soldiers to defend the palace, leaving only a small detachment to protect his home. The emperor survived the attack, but was left deeply scarred. When General Edmund Sullivan returned home, he found only destruction. His wife lay among the lifeless bodies, and grief overwhelmed him. Edmund trembled violently, retching uncontrollably, as he took up his sword. He prepared to join his beloved in death until the cry of a newborn pierced the silence. It was his daughter, whom his wife had shielded with her life for 18 years. Edmund poured all of his love and devotion into raising his daughter, hoping to somehow atone for the loss of his wife. Although Crown Prince Elijah Collins doted on his fiancée, many women still sought his favor. June urged Emma Sullivan, the Crown Princess, to assert herself. However, Emma was too busy strolling with her royal sisters, listening to music and indulging in her childhood habits. Meanwhile, Elijah Collins occupied himself with earning money. Occasionally, Elijah would encounter Edmund Sullivan, Emma's father, and complain, "Father-in-law? You didn't tell me that the Crown Princess was such a spendthrift." Edmund, ever innocent, would reply, "You never asked." The royal sisters, all married and well-versed in handling their husbands, offered advice. Taming a man is like training a dog. Grab hold of his weak spot, and he'll obey. Exactly. If one gives them an inch, they will take a mile. Listen to us, and one will not go wrong. Sister-in-law. Even an aunt from afar chimed in, stating that only by controlling the purse strings can one truly rule the household. Those words left Emma's head spinning. In truth, Emma did not need such elaborate strategies. When Elijah Collins returned with his stipend, Emma simply held out her hands and said, "Hand it over." Elijah paused, sighed, and responded, "Crown Princess, you've become what? Even more beautiful?" Emma Sullivan urged everyone to subscribe and hit the notification bell, ensuring that no one would miss out on any new videos.